we're going to have a look at this 1993 to 97 period. Essentially, this is the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement, and there are lots of things we need to be aware of that helped get us to the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, and so you'll see a lot of them highlighted here in a pinky red colour, but I'll just talk you through a little bit about each of them. So we have John Hume and Gerry Adams. John Hume is from the SDLP. He is really determined to achieve change in Northern Ireland through peaceful methods. And he's talking to Gerry Adams, who's a member of Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin would have links with the IRA, who were prepared at this stage to use violence to get the nation for Ireland that they were looking for. But these guys take the initiative. They start something new. And what that new thing is that they meet in secret for talks to try and figure out if they can find a way forward for nationalism. Can they find a way that will bring United Ireland and that they could work together to get that? So they have these talks from 1988 through to 1993, and then they're sort of discovered. The reason they had to do them in secret was because both of these leaders knew that their supporters might not like the idea of them talking to the other person. John Hume, his supporters didn't want him talking to the paramilitaries, and Gerry Adams, his supporters wouldn't have wanted to hear that he was talking to those who weren't prepared to use violence, those who maybe were considered a bit softer in their approach. So anyway, the news of these talks come out, and as a result of that, the British government say that, well, look, if we could get to a ceasefire in Northern Ireland, if those paramilitaries would lay down their guns, then the British government would act imaginatively, that they would also try and be creative in finding a solution for Northern Ireland. And the other thing he reiterated at this time was that there would be no British selfish strategic or economic interest in Northern Ireland. That really what they were saying was the British government weren't in Northern Ireland for their own gain. They weren't there because of any strategy, and they weren't there because of what Northern Ireland could do for Britain in terms of money, economically. Okay. Sinn Féin then in 1992 published a document, and they are putting forward in that document their aim for a peaceful solution in Northern Ireland. This document's called Towards a Lasting Peace, and ultimately they were saying all nationalists could work together for the good of Northern Ireland. But ultimately, remember, they want a nation for Ireland. They want a united Ireland. In order to try and help get a bit of momentum at this stage then, the British government suspend the Anglo-Irish Agreement. And if you'll remember, Unionists really didn't like the Anglo-Irish Agreement, and so in this regard they were trying to bring Unionists on board as well. They could see nationalists were trying to get a move towards peace, and they thought that if they suspended the Anglo-Irish Agreement it might get Unionists on board as well. They also suggested, the British government suggested, that if Northern Ireland was going to get fixed, if there was going to be a solution in Northern Ireland, it would come along 3 different strands. So the first one you can see there is about Northern Ireland. They would set up a government or an assembly in Northern Ireland, and it would have to be based on, can you guess? Power sharing. Okay. The other thing that they were going to have was north-south links, so that would be between Belfast and Dublin. A bit, I suppose, like what we saw in the Council of Ireland in 1974, and also in the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1985. And then the third strand was that there would have to be east-west relations between Dublin and London if they were going to find a solution for Northern Ireland. So these 3 strands were suggested, and we'll see those running right through into the Good Friday Agreement. So anyway, by 1993 they do come to a bit of a declaration. They come to something that they feel is worth announcing. And so the British and Irish governments make this declaration from Downing Street, which is obviously where the British government are based. And Britain, their declaration, the part of it that they said was that they would uphold the democratic wish of the people on unity. That if the Northern Ireland people wanted a united Ireland, they would allow that. The Republic said that they would respect the border, and would only push for unity if the majority of people in Northern Ireland wanted it. So you can see there the British are actually really trying to reassure nationalists that they wouldn't stand in the way of a united Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland are trying to reassure unionists to say that they won't disrespect the border unless most people want rid of it. Okay, the British also say a few other things, and you can see them there on the left-hand side. They wouldn't persuade unionists that Britain was still sovereign, that means in charge in Northern Ireland, and they reiterated that idea that there was no selfish strategic economic interest. They just said that again, that Peter Brook had said earlier. Okay, so what do people think about this? Well, you can imagine the unionist reaction is a bit wary. They really don't want to see any move on the border. Nationalists are seeing that there's an opportunity maybe, if there's a majority, to move towards unity, and so that's a good thing for them. And they're also glad to see the Republic of Ireland being consulted, at least in terms of Northern Ireland interests. The IRA and the Loyalist reaction is perhaps the most significant though. So their reaction is to issue ceasefires. And the IRA go first. They're going to issue their ceasefire on the 31st of August 1994, followed by the Loyalists on the 13th of October 1994. Now, I'm going to tell you, you should write those down because it'll help you. 31 and 13 use the same digits, a 1 and a 3. And if it helps you remember, it can't be the 31st of October. That would be Halloween, and they wouldn't be announcing ceasefires when everybody's out enjoying the fireworks. So that's the way I help my brain to remember it, and you might use that as well. IRA 31st of August, Loyalists the 13th of October. Okay, so lots of people are excited, obviously, by the ceasefires, but some folks are a bit nervous, and really they wanted to see the word permanent in the IRA ceasefire. And when that word didn't come, instead they heard that it was a complete cessation of violence, but there was no word of permanence. That was a bit of a concern as well for some unionists then. So as a result, we get to these framework documents. You can see they're sort of edging closer to peace, and this is frameworks for how you might move Northern Ireland forward. The first framework document was the plan or the framework for a new assembly, a new government for Northern Ireland. And the second framework was then all about how they might come to agreement. What sorts of things did they need to agree on for peace in Northern Ireland? And you can see these things were self-determination, that's the rule of a country to rule herself, the right of a country to rule herself, the consent on the border, that most people would need to consent to removing the border before that would happen. Non-violence, anybody who's going to be involved in an agreement for Northern Ireland had to have signed up to non-violence. And then this idea of parity of esteem was really quite forward-thinking. It was the idea that if people had been injured or hurt physically in the Troubles, then their injuries, the lasting effects of that would be considered just as seriously as those people who had suffered mental trauma in the Troubles. So this parity of esteem meant that the same level of seriousness was given to both physical and mental injuries from the Troubles. Okay, so who's kind of shaping this? Who's trying to move it forward? Well, we see a US Senator, George Mitchell, and he's involved trying to get things going. He's particularly involved in pushing the idea of non-violence. And he's trying to really get everybody to take part. Some people don't want to take part until there's no weapons, and some people don't want to give up their weapons until there are talks, until there's an opportunity to start discussing these things for agreement. And so what George Mitchell says is, right, maybe we can do both things at once. Maybe we'll do a little bit of talking and we'll give in a little bit of weapons. And on account of some weapons coming in, we'll do some more talking. And on account of more talking, maybe you would give us over some more weapons. And this twin track continues then throughout this 1997 era. But the IRA become impatient with all of this. They thought that the talks would have been moving forward, that they would have been invited to talks because they had given up their violence, there had been a ceasefire. And so they are sort of getting weary waiting for things to happen. They see the suggestion of a peace forum, which was going to be a discussion about what peace would look like and how you would get to peace. They saw that as just the British government delaying things. And so their impatience results in a bomb in Canary Wharf in London in 1996. And Canary Wharf was the new sparkly modern bit of London, really a bit like our whole university area in Belfast is at the minute, gorgeous and glassy and new and lovely. And the IRA made their point that they weren't happy by blowing it up in February 1996. And so that brought us to a really tricky place where they really wanted peace, but they just didn't know how to take that final step. And we'll see that final step in the Good Friday Agreement in the next bit.